What's good? It's Woog. This will either be a competitive and exciting slugfest, or it will be a long, one-sided beatdown that becomes increasingly difficult to watch. We have Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, 44 wins and 1 loss, taking on Gabriel Rosado, 26 wins, 16 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. This is Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez's return to the ring after suffering his first professional loss against one of the best fighters in the sport, pound for pound. We're talking about Dimitri Bivol, as Zurdo challenged Bivol for Bivol's long-held WBA light heavyweight title. Zurdo Ramirez is a former WBO 168-pound champion, and up to the point of fighting Dimitri Bivol, he had knocked out all of his 175-pound opponents since moving up to light heavyweight. And while he did get outclassed by Dimitri Bivol, I think that, you know, when this fight between Ramirez and Rosado was made, I wasn't even sure whether this was like an ethical thing to do. This would be Gabriel Rosado's debut at 175. He'd be debuting at 37 years old, and not all 37 years old is equal. He is older in fight years in terms of wear and tear than his biological age would indicate. And look, I'm gonna read off a couple stats, and this might sound a little bit harsh, but I couldn't not notice this and not then point it out. Gabriel Rosado, okay, he had a big fight against Gennady Golovkin. You know, Gabriel Rosado was at 154 for a while, went up to challenge, you know, the then very feared middleweight champion. At that time, Triple G only held the WBA middleweight title, but this was in 2013, and Gabriel Rosado gave a very spirited effort and ended up getting TKO'd in the 7th round. And, you know, again, he gave it his all, but it just became overwhelming with Triple G's boxing ability, plus just his, you know, pound for pound vicious punching power. He was probably one of the 2 or 3 hardest punchers pound for pound in the sport. I would say Triple G, along with maybe the Crusher Kovalev. Adonis Stevenson's left hand was also deadly, but this was such a vicious beatdown that Gabriel Rosado's longtime trainer, Billy Briscoe, basically pleaded with his dad that we stop, you know, we, as in them, their corner, stop the fight. And I mean, they caught the discussion on camera, and they actually played it towards the end of the broadcast. I'll never forget what that looked and sounded like. He was saying, he's gonna die in there, man. And then he said, no, I'm stopping the fight. He's gonna die in there. And then he ends up stopping the fight. Vicious beating, and it just kind of added to the tough guy reputation of Gabriel Rosado just being the consummate gamer. I mean, the guy is a fighter's fighter. He actually came to the sport late, but dedicated himself to it, definitely picked up a bunch of skills along the way to where, you know, he's a good fighter, a good competitive fighter, and he's competed with many of the best of the era. But let me read off these stats to you. Gabriel Rosado, since that 2013 fight against Triple G, Gabe Rosado has won 5 fights in the last 10 years. Again, 5 wins in the last 10 years. He has won 5 of his last 18 fights. Think about that. In his last 18 fights, he's only won 5 of them. And it looks like one of those records where, I mean, if you look at anybody's box record, Wikipedia, wherever you look to see somebody's fight-by-fight career arc and career trajectory, you often see even legends. As you get to the tail end, you see a lot more, if it's Wikipedia, a lot more pink, indicating losses as you get towards the end of the career. Just, you know, there's a lot of green, a lot of wins to start your career off, and then you become more of a win some, lose some guy. Gabriel Rosado's become a lose some, win one, lose another, win one, win. He's been more of that type of fighter over the past decade. Like, this isn't a recent phenomenon. It's just that Gabe Rosado had a super unexpected knockout over rising prospect, Bektamir Melikuziev, Bek Bully. Gabriel Rosado uncorked a beautiful counterpunch as Melikuziev came in head over heels, very over pursuant, and he got caught, blasted, face planted, end of the fight, one of the knockouts of the year. It was such an unexpected and well-deserved moment for Gabriel Rosado. Like, you couldn't help but feel happy for the guy. The guy's been a gatekeeper, contender turned gatekeeper turned journeyman. He's kind of had that sort of a career arc. So to see him have that moment against Bec Bully, it was phenomenal. This was in June of 2021. But what that inadvertently did, or maybe advertently if you want to keep on fighting, is it created the illusion that we had a new Gabriel Rosado, that this provided some new life to his career, like it was some sort of a career resurgence, because it came right after the very boring but competitive and close split decision loss to Daniel Jacobs. Remember, that was one of the most boring main events of the year. It was widely criticized. But after that win, that knockout win, that shocking win over Bec Bully, Gabriel Rosado has lost his last 3 fights. He got blown out. And when I say blown out, I mean not stopped. He went the distance against Jaime Munguia. But there was so much firepower deployed by Jaime Munguia that he just couldn't outgun Munguia. And he took a vicious beating over the course of 12 rounds. He took so many hard, laser-like punches from Munguia in that fight, but it went the 12-round distance. And then he lost, he kind of surprisingly lost a majority decision against Shane Mosley Jr., and then he got totally outboxed by Ali Akhmedov, where it's hard to give Gabriel Rosado a round, maybe the very last round, the 10th round, but the unofficial scorecards had it for Akhmedov, all 8 rounds through 8 rounds. It was one of those types of fights. It wasn't like a super vicious beating, but it was a clear outclassing where Gabriel Rosado, it just looked like this probably should be Gabe Rosado's last fight. If not that Shane Mosley fight beforehand, if not that Jaime Munguia fight before that. This guy has been losing to most guys for a long time, but granted, he's been fighting very good fighters. Shane Mosley Jr., not elite. Akhmedov, the jury's still out. We don't know how good he can get, but at this point, you can't really say he's an elite fighter. But before that, he fought Munguia, Daniel Jacobs. He fought Jermell Charlo back in the day and fought him pretty competitively. But you also see that he lost to Sulechki, he lost to Martin Murray in 2017, lost to Willie Monroe Jr. in 2016. So again, he's lost way more than he's won over the past 10 years. And that Bec Bully knockout, that knockout over Bec Bully, kind of extended his shelf life to his detriment, if you ask me. I almost wish it didn't happen, because then you couldn't justify putting him in the ring with Munguia, Akhmedov, and now Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez at 175. We're not even talking 168 or 160 anymore. And Gabriel Rosado, yes, he does have pretty broad shoulders. He's about 5'11", nearly 6 feet, but Zurdo looks huge even at light heavyweight. It's hard to imagine that this guy kept on sweating down to 168 when he was a longtime WBO belt holder. But Zurdo Ramirez is 6'3", so he's going to have a 4-inch height advantage. This fight, by the way, is taking place March 18th and is happening at the Walter Pyramid in Long Beach. That's literally down the street from here. I literally drove past it picking up this Starbucks today. And the Pyramid is it's kind of it's the landmark of Cal State Long Beach, right around 7th Street and Bellflower in LBC. But yeah, that's where the fight's taking place. Again, I had questions whether this was even an ethical fight to make. Zurdo Ramirez is a very good fighter. He's a lefty. He's a pretty decent sweet scientist. He's a pretty good technical boxer. I mean, before this fight against Dimitri Bivol, the best guys we had seen him in there against at 168 was probably Jesse Hart and maybe an aging Arthur Abraham. And then at 175, he fought an over-the-hill Sullivan Barrera. And back down at 168, he did fight Jesse Hart twice. It wasn't just one fight against Hart. And they were both pretty competitive fights, very meaningful fights at the time. This is when Jesse Hart was on the top of his game. But Zurdo has also beaten Maxim Vlasov. Remember, Vlasov fought a super razor close fight where Joe Smith Jr. was awarded a win over Vlasov. That's how Joe Smith Jr. won his share of the light heavyweight title. But Zurdo's a pretty good fighter. He's a pretty hard puncher. He's a pressure fighter. He gets hit a bit, which is gonna possibly make this one a little bit interesting, at least in certain moments. Because, lucky for Gabe Rosado, Zurdo Ramirez isn't gonna outclass him from the outside like Ali Akhmedov. Akhmedov is a young fighter who, is very quick, sweet scientist, operates from the outside. So Gabe Rosado doesn't have to worry about that type of strategy being used against him because he couldn't really get off against Akhmedov. He doesn't have the legs of a 20-something-year-old or even a young early 30s fighter. Gabe Rosado, he's got strong legs, but he's not able to close the gap and move in the way that he could when he was, 8 to 10 years younger. So he doesn't have to worry about the Akhmedov approach, which was not too dissimilar from the Shane Mosley Jr. approach. Shane Mosley Jr. also outboxed him from the outside. But unlucky for Gabriel Rosado, this Zurdo versus Rosado fight might look more like Munguia versus Rosado in that this might end up being a firefight. And if it's a firefight, then like, the late Macho Man Randy Savage might say, it could get real bad for you. Again, Zurdo has power at 175. Gabe Rosado, Beck Bully knockout aside, didn't show tremendous power at 168. He had decent power at 160, but you would have to go back to 2017 to find Gabe Rosado's last knockout before Beck Bully when he stopped Glenn Tapia in the 6th round. So he has good power at 160, decent power at 168, but not too much, Beck Bully knockout aside. So at 175 light heavyweight, who the hell knows, but I don't think he's going to be able to outgun Zurdo. He might be able to hit Zurdo if Zurdo starts going head over skis in pursuing Gabe Rosado. But Gilberto Ramirez, I think that he's a good enough fighter where he's not just going to sloppily try to collapse the pocket against Rosado and give him every last opportunity to counterpunch effectively and to catch him cleanly with something. I think Zurdo is going to be able to exercise some sort of range control and then find his opportunities to let his hands go, and in a way where he doesn't leave himself too exposed, because I assume Rosado's going to want to, I think Rosado's strategy is going to be to look for those counterpunching opportunities, kind of sit back, let him bring the fight to you. Don't wear your own legs out trying to pursue the guy and come after him. Be patient. Don't get beat up too much from the outside. Try to slip what you can. But again, look for Zurdo to start throwing the power punches so then you could let your hands go and try catching him with power shots. I think that is Gabe Rosado's only chance of winning this fight. And it is possible. It's possible. But I just think that the much greater likelihood is that Zurdo Ramirez starts winning rounds early, doesn't really let up. Like Gabe Rosado, I could see being competitive in certain rounds, but you know how it is when somebody might be winning 7 out of 8 rounds or something, but those rounds that they're winning are kind of competitive and close rounds where I can see Rosado being formidable and being like, okay, Rosado has some moments, but can I really give him that round? I think this could look like that in terms of how these rounds are going to be scored. So I could see, Zurdo being up like 4 rounds to 1 after 5 rounds, or, 7 rounds to 1 after 8 rounds. The question is Gabe Rosado going to like sustain a cut from the punches that he's absorbing from this huge 175 pounder, where even if he feels game, even if he's not getting knocked to the canvas and he's still durable enough to stand up, that maybe he's just going to take such a pummeling where they have to stop the fight? Or is he going to be able to bring this to a 12-round decision? Look, if this was a 10-rounder, I would say maybe he goes the distance. His fight against Akhmedov, that was a 10-rounder. The one against Shane Mosley Jr. was a 10-rounder. The one where he went the distance against Jaime Munguia was a 12-rounder. And I still don't know how they let that one go the 12-round distance. And in fairness to Gabriel Rosado, he hasn't been stopped since 2014, where he got stopped by David Lemieux. So again, Rosado is extremely durable. And usually when he gets stopped, it's because he's just been getting beaten up so long over the course of time that somebody is responsible enough to stop the fight, whether it's the ref, whether it's the corner. But Gabe Rosado hasn't been the type of fighter who gets dropped, who's shaky getting up, then gets dropped again and can't make it back to his feet, fight's over. He doesn't often lose in that sort of way. But I think that Zurdo throws enough punches to where somebody's going to have to step in and stop this short of the 36 minutes that this fight is scheduled for. So, you know, I was thinking about whether this goes the distance or not, but I'm going to pick Zurdo Ramirez to get a stoppage. I think he's going to be winning rounds. He's a good boxer. Dimitri Bivol showed him that there are levels to this. He's not a fantastically great boxer, but he's a good boxer. And again, he's not going to have to work too hard to find Gabriel Rosado. Again, this might make for some interesting opportunities for Gabe Rosado to catch Zurdo cleanly. So, you know, there is an outside chance that Rosado can hurt Zurdo, but I just think that the greater likelihood is that Zurdo puts a beating on Rosado. Rosado shows resilience, shows a lot of durability, shows that he's as game as they come, and he might not get dropped by Zurdo. But I just see him getting hit with so many punches in this fight that they eventually stop it. So I'm going to go with Zurdo via like a late TKO, like a 9th through 11th round, somewhere in there, TKO. And, you know, if Rosado goes a 12-round distance against Gilberto Ramirez, hats off to him. That's another one of those, you know, moral victories. You just really worry about what these sustained beatdowns are going to do to somebody even as tough as Gabriel Rosado over time. So I am a little bit concerned about this one. Again, I didn't like it when I saw that this fight was being made. I'm like, what? Like, this guy hasn't even fought at light heavyweight. And yes, Zurdo's coming off of a loss, his first loss. And, you know, there's also maybe an outside possibility that that loss to Bivol psychologically damaged Zurdo in a way where he's not able to mentally recover and he's not comfortable just letting his hands go. And maybe this does affect his career going forward, losing that decision to Dimitri Bivol. But no, I think Zurdo's still going to have the goods, both physically and mentally, to put a beating on Gabriel Rosado, you know, straight up. And yes, he might get caught with some clean punches and, you know, like that knockout over Rebek Bully did. Every Gabe Rosado moment might give the audience and the viewing audience and the crowd there and the corner and the referee an idea that Gabe Rosado's still in this fight. But don't let those one-offs fool you. This guy, I think, is just going to be taking a ton of punches. And again, I'm going Zurdo via late stoppage. But let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Do you see Zurdo Ramirez getting another title opportunity soon? Like, do you think he's going to more or less get right back on track? And do you think that he's going to be a light heavyweight champion at some point? Let me know what you think. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.